All right, we think we're live. All
Woo!
indications show us that we're live.
If not, we're going to have a great conversation with just the two of us.
Exactly. This could be a great conversation for the two of us. And if you're out there on Facebook, do let us know. We're using this great new technology called Be Live to do an event, to do this live talk, Julie and I, and we would love to hear your comments and questions as we talk about these live from the parenting trenches and really addressing some parenting tools and some common issues that parents run into. And Julie, this week we're actually on my Facebook page, so it would help the folks who are connected to me and my followers is to have you say a couple things about yourself. What would you share with people to introduce yourself to the world?
Thank you. First, I'm really excited about doing this, and I think the most important thing is, what I always tell people is I'm very fluent in teen, and I've been around teenagers for decades. And what I do is I work with parents and professionals to help them learn the language, because it is a totally different language than what we're used to as adults. And you know what? I'm gonna pass the mic over to you, because I know that there's a lot of people in my group listening as well who may not be as familiar with you. So I think it'd be great if they heard a little bit about what you do.
Oh my gosh. Well, thanks for asking. I have the extreme pleasure of working with dads, men who are looking to raise what I like to call a generation of limitless kids. Like when we can really engage with our kids, when we can, like every parent is a little bit different. Every dad is a little bit different. And when we can really like allow ourselves to be that unique, our unique self and bring ourselves fully to the table with our parenting, not only do we get to let our kids see us, but we get to live out loud who we are in the world for our kids. And we get this opportunity to feel super empowered about ourselves, and our kids get to see that about themselves and see that that's what's possible in life for them as well.
I love that so much, and that is probably one of the biggest things. And I am a licensed psychotherapist, as you know, and a mom of teens. But that is the one takeaway that I would love all parents to go away with at all times: is being yourself shows your kids that they can be themselves, and that they can achieve, and be limitless, like you said, which is so powerful.
Right. So I have in my notes here that we're supposed to ask the question, why are we having this conversation? Like, why are we doing it?
But, why are we doing this?
Why are we doing this? Like, why bother?
We have so many answers about this. I know we do.
Why don't you take a swing at it first, and then we'll see where it goes.
Well, I think the first thing, the why, comes from the fact that you and I started a conversation a couple months ago at an event that we were at. And we started a conversation about teenagers, about parenting, about really opening up conversations around what's important to all of us. And I think one of the biggest whys for us being here today is that it is so important for us to start conversations about what supports kids to develop resiliency and grit, because that also allows us to develop resiliency and grit. And one of the things that you've said recently was, we are developing real time with our kids, and they are developing real time. And I think that's why we're here, is we're all going through the parenting trenches together with our kids. We're not alone in this. And so opening up these conversations, here with us, here with everybody else, is really powerful, so that we know that we're here together. We're creating a community for ourselves and our children.
Yeah, you know what? I so resonated when you spoke to you used the word alone. There are so many days where, as parents, even my wife and I work super hard to be in partnership about the way that we parent, the way that we communicate, and even on those days, it's so easy to feel like you're all alone in the trenches of parenting. You're either alone in your role, like as dad, or like in my experience as a dad, or that we're all alone and we're trying to navigate the the whitewater of of teenagers,
Mm-hmm.
what my experience is that when we open those doors and we start sharing what's so for us and our experience, we find that there are endless numbers of other parents who are in the same place. And it just like there's something incredibly like just being seen as like being in the struggle, just being seen and knowing that other people are facing it as well somehow lightens the load. And I know lots of parents who really struggle with where their kids are at and like what's the best way forward. And just even having the conversation can make a huge difference.
Absolutely. And you said something really important is that we just want to be seen. And all of us, whether we are younger kids, whether we're teenagers, whether we're adults, we just want to be seen and heard and valued for who we are, not what we do or didn't do, but just who we are. And as grown-ups that are in teens' lives and just grown-ups in general, we're looking for pockets of connection with others that are having a similar experience because that also allows us to connect with ourselves.
Yeah. Cool. So we could do that all day, but we have to jump in.
We could.
We actually have a topic today.
Yay!
So I have a question. So Julie is broadcasting from beautiful Colorado, and I am broadcasting from beautiful Seattle. I'm curious if you're live and you're listening, why don't you post where you're watching from? Because we'd love to have an idea of where folks are tuning in from, because it's 9:30 on the West Coast. It's 10:30 Mountain Time where Julie is. And I'm curious where folks are tuning in from. And feel free to answer that in the comments below. We'll see them here. And as questions come up, feel free to put them in the comments below as well. And we're going to jump in because this week's topic is pretty exciting. We're going to be here 4 weeks in a row, 3 Wednesdays and a Thursday, if I remember correctly.
We're going to mix it up a little.
We're going to take on what really showed up for us is 4 super common issues that parenting run into. And today's topic is listening and using listening as a tool. And I guess, Julie, when I say using listening as a tool, what does that spring to mind for you?
So actually, I think listening is one of the most powerful things that we can do in our relationship, not just with our kids, but with anyone. And for me, I think it is the default go-to number one tool for everything. It's the one that I strive, and I will say I strive to use it. It doesn't mean I always go to it immediately, but it is the one that I strive to. And I think what happens is, as parents, we think we're listening. We really think, I'm listening. As soon as we say we think we're listening, or I'm listening to my kid, we've already tuned them out. And so listening as a tool is really coming in with a beginner's mind and beginner's ears, and not making the assumptions of what you think is best for your child, what you think is going on, and just being present and paying attention and being aware to what they're saying.
Nice. So for transparency's sake, while Julie was talking, I was curious. I hadn't seen a comment yet. So I went over to my Facebook to realize that it was somehow the settings got that only Julie and I were seeing what we were doing. So how interesting is that? So we're now up and we're public and we're live. So if you're just joining us, Julie and I are jumping in and we're having a conversation about using listening as a tool. And especially when we're working with teens, you're going to be able to see all of this after the fact. It'll be up for at least a couple of days on my Facebook group. And we're in part of 4 conversations. Julie was just answering the question, like, what does it mean to use listening as a tool? And what I noticed for me is listening, as a parent, like listening invites us to listen differently, right? Like we're pretty passive listeners in the world. And I think there's this real opportunity when we're listening to our kids to start taking a look at what's going on underneath it. What's going on and what's driving the conversation we're having right now. I have 2 teenagers, a young teenager and an older teenager in my household. And it's the regular litany of like, this is what I want, This is what I don't want. This is what I like. This is what I don't like. Can I have this? I don't want that. I have to do this. Do I not have to do that? And to a certain extent, you can sort of listen on the surface like we normally listen. But there's like, for me, I try to really take a look at like what's going on underneath it, especially when it's something that either is consistent or seems to be like it's a loaded topic. Like, like, why aren't you letting me, my son who's 13 or 14 now is dying to have a phone. And all of his friends have phones, and everyone around him has a phone, and it's our family decision not to. And so so for instance, for me is like listening for the what's underneath. And it really has caused me to take a look at what is he speaking to. And for me, what I discovered was, or I intuited that what he's really speaking to is he's feeling left out and he's feeling disconnected. And what I became really aware of is that because everyone else in our home, not just in his class, has a phone, that there's a level of disconnection that he feels actually from the rest of the family. So we've really worked hard to put some structures in place to make sure that phones are find a new place when we're all together, so that we can foster a new sense of connection. And that's kind of an example for me about like using listening as a tool.
Well, and I think that's a really good example, because I think you come in, there's two different ways you can approach it. And when you combine, what I was saying about listening with the beginner's mind of just listening to what they're saying, being very aware. And once you hear those words, yes, then going, what's underneath this? And one of the simplest ways to foster this is to ask the question, what do you think about this? And then as they're telling you, instead of jumping in and saying, well, here's what I think, it's tell me more. And those two questions speak to both what we were both saying. What do you think? And tell me more, because that's going to get you the information, but also take you underneath to what's really going on.
Yeah, there's so great, right? I love where you're looking around the like the intentional inquiry, right? Like it seems like you're having a conversation about being an intentional inquiry, and it's always the simple questions that are open-ended, that invite them to say something. Can you say something more about that? Or I'm not sure I understand, like even something as simple as like, I'm not sure I understand. Can you say it in a different way so that I understand better?
Right.
And the inquiry, especially I notice for myself as a man, that I always want to get to the root of the problem to see how I can fix it or support them so we can move on. That's kind of how I'm wired. And so it's really a muscle that takes some exercise around going, okay, there's something here and I need to step back for a second and like open up the inquiry like a book. Inquiry like a book, like, oh, wow, it sounds like you're upset about that. And then
and not that book slammed in your face. Because it will happen before. We've all been there. And I like that you say, as a man, that you jump right into kind of that, let's fix it and let's move on, because often, moms will come in and say, oh, it's okay. What do you need to feel better? How can I make you feel better? How can I help? And both those, we're wired to either want to make things easier for our kids, to make them feel better. But when we listen to solve something, or listen to, and even making them feel better, we're still trying to solve it for them, we're taking something away from them. And the one thing kids need to build, and there's many things that they need the skills to develop and build, but it's problem solving skills. And so listening as parents and as grown-ups in their lives invites them to develop problem solving skills. And so when you said you want to open that book, tell me more. I'm not tracking. What's going on? What do you think? You're putting it back on them to say, well, here's what I think. Maybe here's what would work. So you're developing that problem solving.
Yeah, and you're actually empowering them, right? Like empowering them to solve it, because there are certainly some times, and my experience certainly is with my son about this, that he'll say something that clearly he started the conversation in his head, but what the part that came out was a continuation of what was in his head, but actually wasn't connected to anything he said out loud. So it seems like a non sequitur, like, I'm not quite sure what that means. And so I find myself saying, I think you started that conversation in your head and some of it got outside. Can you put them all together for me and tell me, right? And here's the thing that has really helped me. And I got this reflection from somebody that was so great, a great parent and coach. When you don't know what question to ask any question, because at least that will start it, right? Like there's been more times than not where I'll be in the kitchen with my daughter, for instance, and there's something going on. I can't tell what it is. And I'll say, how you doing? And they'll say, fine. And which of course doesn't really give me anything. And I'm like, well, you seem upset or distracted. And which I'm like, no, I'm not upset or distracted. And then there'll be a pause and they're like, I'm just really frustrated, right? Like, so I took a guess, but I didn't nail it. But in taking the guess, it opened the door anyways. It opened the door like, oh, okay. Oh, I'm so sorry you're frustrated. What are you frustrated about? And then it becomes like it's teasing out threads. It's almost like teasing out threads, right? Like you don't want to pull too hard on that ball of yarn because it'll just knot up. It's like, how can you tease it lightly to open up the door?
There's a couple things you said that I think I love hearing it when parents say this. You asked what's going on, and what is always more powerful than why with kids. When we say, so you said, what's going on to make you frustrated, rather than why are you frustrated? When we use why questions, it puts kids on the defense. Because they feel like they're kind of living in a bubble and they often feel judged. And as soon as if we say, why are you so frustrated? They feel like they can't be frustrated. But when you say, what's making you frustrated? It opens up for more conversation. And, I also love that you're like, well, here's what I'm noticing, when they say fine is, fine is the ultimate blow off answer. And I too am parents of I have 3 teenagers. I have 17, 15, and 14. So I'm in it as well. And, when I get those fine answers, I'm like, okay, is that the fine where you really are fine and happy? Or is this the fine where you're like, ugh, this is going to be a conversation? And they're like, and as soon as they always look at me and they're like, ugh, it's the second one. I'm like, okay. And I use the same tactic in my practice. And it's enough to interrupt what's going on to invite them to talk. And that's when we can say, hey, I'm here to listen. Like really listen if you need that.
Nice. Yeah, I loved what you were saying about using the why. The why also assumes that they have to have an answer.
Yes.
Right? Like they have to know. And our kids are constantly being told what to do and expected of, right? Like do your homework, show up to practice, try your hardest, don't be afraid to fail because somehow parents aren't afraid to fail, right? Right? And do your chores and you like, what's the answer to this homework? And you've got a test and a quiz and why aren't you using your table manners like we always expected? But the why, especially when it's something that's going on inside them, is not something that they, like most adults have no idea why they feel the way they do.
Right.
So, you've actually, instead of lowering the bar, which allows them to come forward and share with you that vulnerable thing that's going on for them, you use the why, you just raise the bar again. Like now it's the next level they're supposed to figure out and get over and pulling up an answer to. So it can be super challenging. And my wife constantly, and God bless her for it, is reminding me that kids, like that the prefrontal cortex, the frontal lobe, the analytical and the what we consider the adult part of our brain doesn't fully develop until you're 24. So there's lots of years of development.
Right.
And there's a lot of stuff going on in the inside, and it changes all the time. And just when we think we understand it, something shifts.
It shifts, and your wife is right. So the prefrontal cortex, which is the area that manages emotions, reasoning, that does not develop until mid-20s. But the amygdala, which is the fight or flight response, is fully developed. And so when we are asking questions that kids feel like, I have to have an answer, or they've already decided, my parents have already decided the answer, they either are going to fight, become more defensive, or they're going to run, and which is just shutting down the conversation. So the more we can take away those questions of why or shoulds, you should be doing, why should you do this, or why are you doing that? Those will shut them down. But when we can say, what's going on, or even say, maybe you don't know what's going on. Sometimes it's just okay. Like, I don't always know what's going on. So the more you can invite them to have that space and then listen to what they're saying, the more you give them permission to stop fighting, to stop running, and to just be with who they are and who you are.
Yeah, so great. I just posted a comment down below, and I would love to hear from folks who are tuning in right now, is what strategies do you use, have you found successful, to get your kids to open up and talk with you? Go ahead and post it in the comments below. We'd love to hear what you have, or if you have any questions for Julie and I as we talk about this super important topic about using listening as a tool. I wanted to share with you, I have a good friend of mine, a guy named Kenny Fikes, and I went to high school with him, and I constantly have to keep giving him credit for this because he coined a phrase which is super valuable for me, and I use it as a parenting tool. I don't know if he did, but he has this parenting tool, or this tool he calls windshield time. He lives in Oklahoma, and he says, I love to go on long drives. And the reason I love to go on long drives is because I love to use that time to just be with myself. So he doesn't turn on the radio. He doesn't listen to podcasts. He's not doing anything other than driving, to just allow himself to be with himself and watch the landscape go by and just sort of stay tuned in, but tune out as well and take a look at what's going on inside. And I have tried using this concept, windshield time, as a way to create space where my kids get to step in and initiate what's going on for them. Mm-hmm. And so it's really about creating space for silence. Yes. Right? Like when our kids come home at the end of a day, when our kids come home at the end of this crazy long day where they're exhausted, that they've been asked to do and told what to do all day long, from their teachers to their coaches to their parents, and they've been out in the world and they've had to deal with whatever they've had to deal with, classmates, the teacher doesn't like me, the too much homework, my socks got wet, whatever the thing was, and they come home. Our home is that safe place. Our home is that refuge. Mm-hmm. And it gets compromised when we fill it with more demands. Like, there's already going to be expectations. There's already expectations in the home. They're healthy expectations. It's like, somebody's got to do the trash. Someone's got to feed the cat. Somebody's got to, set the table. Those are healthy expectations. But having home be a space where we can allow our kids to unwind and unpack their day seems like a huge opportunity that is incredibly important to be present to.
I'm so glad you said that, because this is where listening takes a different level. I agree that first half hour, maybe hour after kids come home from school, they need silence. However they're going to unpack their day. And silence can look like listening to music. It could look like sketching. It could look like journaling. It could look like going for a run. It's whatever works for them. But the way we listen when we're giving them silence is we listen to the nonverbals. So this is where listening takes a different turn, is you look to the cues of what your child's sending you. Do they look like they're frustrated, like you had said earlier? Do they look like they could be hungry? Do they look like they just need permission to cry or step away? Do they look like they need a hug? You get those cues, that time right after school, you're gathering information. You're listening with your eyes, your ears, you're listening with your body of what they're telling you non-verbally. That's not the time to talk about it. You circle back after they've had some silence and come in and say, hey, I noticed this. What do you need? Or what? And I love what do you need rather than how can I help? Because when you say, what do you need? Or is there something you want to talk about? You're putting that opportunity of developing their own needs, identifying their own needs, building their own needs back on them rather than you as an adult telling them what they need. Because their job is to figure out their own needs. Their job is to separate from you and make their own decisions and be their own person. And to say, what do you need? Gives them permission that it's okay. My mom and dad, the grown-ups in my life see that it's okay.
Yeah. Oh, so great, Julie. So great, right? Like giving them that permission to be whoever they are, and just come in. And some days it's just they just want to come in and unpack their backpack and just get a little time to just be alone, because very often they're with people all day long, right? Like if we put ourselves in our teenager shoes, and this is really separate from like our experience of teendom, because their experience of teendom is dramatically different, and my kid's life looks dramatically different than mine did as a teen. But if I think about my teen's life, they go to school and they're with people as they commute into school, whether it's on the bus or it's in a carpool, and then they're in class, and then they're between classes, and then they're having lunch with people, and then they're back in classes, and then they go on to do whatever activities that is, whether that's, whatever activity your child may be in. And my kids are kind of sports kids. And the first time that they're allowed to be alone is when they first come home by themselves. And there's this piece about just allowing yourself to like settle in. And sometimes for some kids, they want to come home and immediately unpack their day in the moment. My son's like that. He totally just wants to come in the door and just like let you have it.
Right.
Which is a little bit like standing in front of a Gatling gun. And where my daughter comes in and she wants, frankly, to be left alone. Like, I'm just going to unpack my lunch and I'm going to go into, we have a room we call study hall where everybody does their homework. I'm going to go into study hall. I'm just going to unpack my stuff. And for me, being gregarious and outgoing, it took a little while, but I figured out, this isn't the time to go, tell me all about your day. Yeah. She is, tell me all about her day.
Well, and this is where, because we're talking about listening as a tool, we have to listen to ourselves and listen to what we're saying. And are we jumping in too soon? Are we not paying attention? And listen to our own cues of, wait, is me wanting to talk right when, I have a child like that too, that always wants to talk right away. And then two, they're like, yeah, whatever, I'm going to go do my own thing. And I had to listen to my own self of was me wanting to engage with them more about me or about them? And that's where, listening, it's this universal tool for all things in our life. And so when we are around teenagers, we have to tune into ourselves and listen to our own needs too. And what I realized is I wanted to talk with them so much because we were, they had their day and I had my day. I realized what was important to me was spending time talking with some other groups and peers and friends, because it helped me develop my needs. And that's where listening becomes really important for us as adults as well, not just in the relationship with our kids, but with ourselves.
Totally great. So I'm curious, and this is a question, I'm going to ask this generally, and I'd love to see if you're watching live, or if you're watching a recording of this, feel free to post in the comments below, but I'd love to have you answer this question, Julie. From the current day, what area, where's one you could walk away from today's conversation and be like, oh yeah, that's something I could make a difference with, or I could put a little more focus or energy on? Where do you see, like, because, I just to frame that just for a sec, is we really are evolving in real time. You know, people, especially adults, have this, I'm who I am and I've always been this way. And I don't believe that. I actually believe that I'm committed to turning that on its head, and that we're actually evolving in real time, that we're growing and changing and shifting. And it's in response to our circumstances around us, but also as we're developing and learning more about ourselves and about the world. Mm-hmm. And our teens are doing the same. And so nobody's got this figured out. You know, we're not perfect parents. We still struggle some days.
You're right. Every day.
We struggle more than less.
Yes.
And so, you know, like, in light of what you have heard today, what shows up on your radar is something that you might put more energy towards or see as an opening for your home?
Oh, that's a great question. So for me, I think my situation's one where I spend time with my kids 1 week off, 1 week on. And listening takes a little different tone at times, or a different path. So where I'm putting more energy, and today is a great example, is listening more through other means. It's sending out a message, whether it's, sending a text that just says, hey, thinking about you, tell me about one great thing. And that's something that I'm learning as a practice, to find other ways to listen that aren't always face-to-face, which is really important. And you said something that actually triggered something that I do need to also do, which helps with listening. And it seems counterintuitive, but I use this in my practice with parents. And someone told me it works. And I know it works because I've heard this before. Gum. When you want to talk, your kids are telling you something, put a couple pieces of like Hubba Bubba gum in your mouth, because you cannot talk and chew gum at the same time. And I realized I need to go buy some more gum. It is one of my favorite hacks with listening, because when you want to jump in and tell your kids, but do this, chew some gum, bite your tongue, do something. And so I just realized I will be buying some gum today.
Yeah.
And same with you. What's one thing you think that you'll take away with listening today?
Well, first of all, I just loved everything you just said. As two gregarious, relatively outgoing, articulate people, we have this tendency to talk a lot.
No.
I think what I got really present to was that even in my speaking of it, was how much different my kids approach their day. Mm-hmm. And that I often use I'm kind of like this. I'm kind of this talkative, outgoing guy. So I need to kind of that's the way I know how to interact. Like if the only tool you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And I think that the invitation from this conversation is to really look at what's needed in the moment, as opposed to default going to what my strength is. Mm-hmm. Is what's needed in the moment for me to say something, or is it to let them just be, or go rub their back, or and I think that that's what's so for me. It's something that people who follow my feed regularly know is that I see things about myself in saying them out loud. Here's what you should do. Wow, I should probably do more of that myself. Because we're all just works in progress, and we're all just doing the very best we know how to with the tools that we have. And if we're lucky, we're making these 1% shifts into more effective, more empathetic, more into a more evolved space for ourselves, whatever that looks like for you or for me. Right. I'm so excited about this. We committed that we would be up and doing these live broadcasts. We're going to do a 4-week series, and if they seem like they resonate with people, if we're getting sort of insight and feedback from people that this provides value, we're certainly open to the idea of expanding it. But we have a 4-week series We're going to be on 4 weeks in a row on Wednesday. The last one's actually going to be on Thursday, but not to worry. We're going to give you tons of heads up about that. And the best part is that how we'll know this is making a difference is if you comment on it, you send us a message, or you share it, because that's the way we'll know that it's actually making a difference for you. And we would love to have you be part of the conversation and help us shape it so it fits you best. Now, we have 4 topics, but we're happy to address just about anything because it's Julie and I. Like, there's no parent that is involved with their kids. There's no parent that elbow deep in it that isn't doing the best they know how with what they have. Like, and that's something I want to make sure to put in here is that you are everyone who is watching this, who's a parent, who's found themselves ever struggling about being a parent. It means doing real heroes work. Like, this is the work of ages. This is what creates wisdom in the world. When we do this difficult, challenging, learn on the fly parenting work. And just, remember to have a huge amount of compassion for yourself, and just know that the time you put in now will pay just generations forward. And that's what I'm really hoping folks leave with. And Julie, say something.
I don't know if I could have said it any better. That was beautiful. And I think the thing that I would add is, as a parent, as a grown-up in a teen's life, to breathe. And none of us, we don't have all the answers. And when we are so close to the kids in our life, things can get fuzzy because we love them so much. And love is that warm, fuzzy feeling. And sometimes it helps. It's helpful because we're like, oh, I'm going to do everything I can. But sometimes we can't always see things clearly. And so be gentle with yourself and connect with communities, with people, with us. Ask the questions that you want to just talk about. And sometimes, like we said earlier, we have answers. Sometimes we don't. And it just needs to be a conversation we explore.
Nice.
And I think that's what we want to do, is invite this conversation. And I'm really looking forward to the next 4 weeks this week, but also the next 3 weeks following to continue this conversation.
I can't think of a better way to have wrapped it than what you just said there. So we're going to be here for the next 3 weeks. Down below in the comments, that will take you to a place where you can get email reminders and a link to where to go get a reminder to let you know that we're about to go live, because we know how that goes. It also will make it available to you. It'll also make it available to you after the fact as a recorded group of videos. So for those of you who can't be live or are afraid you might miss one, you'll be able to have them that you can watch anytime at your leisure. And I'll put that comment in the well, we will see you next week. And this has been Charlie King.
I'm Julie Smith.
And this has been Parenting from the Trenches Live, and we will see you next week. Have a good one.
Have a good one. Bye, guys.